Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode. This is going to be a trigger warning here. What we're about to say is most likely going to be not on the 3x5 card of allowable opinion, but I think that's the purpose of the show is to bring a different perspective. So who else better to bring on than host of Talking Into the Void and libertarian, Brett Weiland. Thank you for coming on today, Brett.
Well, thank you very much, fellas. Glad to be here. Thanks for reaching out to me.
For sure. And so to start, I would like to frame the political landscape specifically recently with COVID. It seems like there's been a bit of a culture war between mask, no mask, lockdown, no lockdown. It seems like you either are super for like masking or you're against it, like no government control. And I think that's really interesting because it's polarized the nation. Like hard, as far as I can remember in a long time.
It really has. And one thing that I've never understood from the very beginning of all of this was whatever happened to just letting people do what they want to do. Like, for example, if somebody feels more comfortable wearing a mask and they want to go to Walmart or go to their, local coffee shop, let them wear the mask. Give them the option. Let them do what they're going to do. Let it be all be voluntary. And if somebody doesn't want to, then that's fine. Let them do what they're going to do. The flip side of it too is property rights. So, for example, let's talk about Menards for a second. Menards is huge on making sure that when you go there, you better have that coward cloth on, or else you're not welcome in the store. And they will call the cops. They will trespass you off the property. They've done it. I've driven by Walmart. I can't tell you how many times I've seen cops here in Bismarck, dragging people out, not necessarily arresting them, but telling them, hey, you can go somewhere else, but you ain't staying here. But then here's the flip side: is that the free market is a beautiful thing. There's alternatives. You don't have to go to Menards. You can go to Ace Hardware, which is literally just a mile north of Menards here. I live half a mile from it myself. I love going to Ace. I know the owner, and no mask, no nothing. They don't. The employees wear them probably because they want to, not because they have to. But I've gone there for all my hardware needs and stuff, more so than I ever gone to Menards. And so that's the beauty of a free market, is that let people have the choice. If a business owner decides that he wants to say, hey, I want my customers to be masked, that's fine. That's what I want in my place.
I agree. But I think now, here's the argument though. Now some people and this is where it can get kind of dicey. Vaccine passports or a vaccine ID to get into a store. Like, do you find that right? Like, how does
and that's kind of where the conflict is there too. I am 100% against vaccine passports. I mean, have we honestly sunk so low in a society where now I have to show my papers to go buy groceries? Are you kidding me? That is insane. So what? So those of us who refuse to get the vaccine, those of us who refuse to show our papers, are we now relegated to second-class citizens? So what if if you own an iPhone and you decide that, oh, hey, I'm not going to get the vaccine, all of a sudden you're locked out of Apple's services because you're not going to get the vaccine until you show your papers to the corporate entities that be. Because that's what we're facing here is fascism by corporatism. It's a cooperation between the government and these large corporations that's leading us down this terrible rabbit hole.
I mean, even starting now, I don't know if it was in Chile or where was I take it with a grain of salt. I know I saw it
somewhere in Central America.
Central America, yeah. And there was a volcano that erupted, and every single person that was trying to flee and escape and get out of the area, they weren't allowed to go across the border unless they had a vaccine card. So right there, you're already seeing second-class citizens that are quite literally from a natural disaster trying to flee for their lives. And we're already making the decision to be judge, jury, and executioner by damning them to be stuck there because they didn't get their vaccinations. And they didn't even have an option to really get them for the most part.
That's exactly right. There was a couple of cruise lines that had open ships, and they're not going to take refugees who don't have their vaccine papers. They don't have, they have no proof to show that they've been vaccinated, let alone, So you're going to turn down a bunch of dying refugees whose homes are covered in ash. They can't go back to their home to start rebuilding until that volcano quits erupting. You're going to turn them down because what? They might be diseased?
Yeah.
Really?
The free market answer, it is like, if you want the vaccine and take it, that's fine. You know, you're immune. If the vaccine works, then why are you concerned about whether somebody else is getting the vaccine? Is also another argument that I think strongly presents a case. Why would you need it to be forced upon everybody?
This is the case where, you know, the free market does cut both ways. And that's the harsh reality that we have to live with. The free market coronavirus notwithstanding, the free market both is judgmental and also non-judgmental. It just exists. And that's the thing that we have to recognize, is that the free market exists. It exists for the benefit of some at the detriment of others, but it's also this organic being that it wiggles and flops and does weird things. Some industries suffer while others prosper. It's the way it works. It is both it is full of heart and heartless.
Yeah,
it just is. And that's the biggest thing that I disagree with socialists on, is that we need to wrangle this rampant capitalism. Man, this isn't fair. Well, sorry, but life isn't fair.
Yep.
You gotta roll with the punches. And sorry if you get cold cocked in the nose by a tough time with a downturn. Sorry, but in the land of the free and the home of the brave, we have the ability to get up, dust ourselves off, and try again, unlike anywhere else in the world.
That's very true. And something else that I also have listened to and I thought was really interesting is, when you try to centrally plan, you're essentially predicting results. But the fact of the matter is we all know the human experience isn't predictable, and there are things that we just can't predict. And even if you predict something's going to happen, most of the time it'll actually do the opposite of what you expect, which is what the free market is for. It's like, yeah, we don't have the answers, so let's let the consumers decide, and wherever the chips may fall, the chips may fall. And if you didn't have success in whatever you were doing, it's usually an indication of the market that there isn't a need or a want, or there isn't a specific requirement for that sector. And so I found that really interesting too. And I thought about that for a while, and that is probably the biggest selling point to me of why I, first of all, believe in a lot of libertarian philosophies. So
one more thing about capitalism too is that capitalism does generate greed, but it also generates goodwill. Like, well, you guys talked about Del Ruff. Actually, I used to serve with Del Ruff on the North Dakota Liberty PAC, and I've known Del for a couple of years, and I don't know him all that well, but I know that he runs the Ruff International, and what an amazing program that is. And the free market allows generous people to do generous things. It's granted the ability to donate to that program. It's granted Del the ability to first of all, start it up and then run it and make sure that people in third world countries in Central America, get that extra leg up that they need.
Mm-hmm. I totally
what a great
agree.
program that is. So Dell's literally doing the Lord's work, which is amazing. I love it. And that's what capitalism has helped him do.
By the way, shout out to Dell again. I know we've done that before. And actually, well, that's a good tie into just a reminder that we do have a GoFundMe running for our trip coming to Nicaragua this June. So for our listeners here, consider checking out the GoFundMe. We'll post the link in the description. And that is working with Ruff International, actually. So nice plug, Brett.
Hey, I try to plug my friends here, so I consider both of you friends, even though this is the first time I've literally met you. But
yes,
you guys,
yeah.
I've listened to every single one of your episodes, except for the one on Monday. I've yet to listen to that one, but I've everything that you guys are doing with this program, and you guys going down to Central America in June, it's good work. So I can't thank you enough for doing the Lord's work out there.
Yeah. To go back to doing good with the free market, there's also a lot of bad that you can do. And you can see that,
Of course.
super sketchy stuff goes on in the market, and people are going to cut lines in order to be the best of the best. And that's why it's so important to choose where you're putting your money. You know, you go to Ace Hardware instead of Menards because you're using your money, which is basically your vote on, all right, you're going to start doing this. Well, I don't agree with it. I don't agree with the tactics that you're trying to use against me, you know, necessarily, whatever. And you're going to go somewhere else. And so even if bad things come out of the market or stuff you don't agree with, that's, you know, could be politicized, you can just go somewhere else. So even if there are bad things, the good things will still be found regardless, as long as there is a competitor open. Because, you know, if a free market isn't free, then you're going to start having monopolies.
That's true.
That's exactly right. There's a very, very good Tom Woods is an amazing historian, as you guys know. There's been times where this country has had monopolies. Who was it? I can't think of his name right now, but he had a monopoly on running ships through the canals in the Northeast. And I'm blanking on his name right now, but it sounds like a Dutch name if I remember right. But anyways, where it got to the point where he ran things so efficiently with that monopoly that he did undercut his competitors, but it got to the point where the only thing he charged was to ship goods, and passengers rode for free. And in fact, he started selling food on the ships and ended up selling the food for free. So the only thing that you're buying when you were buying passage on the ship, it was like, well, get on board, let's go. And the state tried to step in and stop that, which is ironic. So
that is interesting. And another thing that I think socialists especially attack is that there's a wealth inequality. And here's the interesting observation that's been made across a historical perspective. It's called the Pareto distribution. And so essentially what it's saying is the top 20% will own 80% of the majority of the things. That will always be the case no matter what system you have, no matter communism, socialism, capitalism. The difference is that top 1%, it constantly changes. So for example, it's like a whirlpool. You see a whirl and it's going around, like the water's going down the drain, but there's always new water coming around the drain that's going down. So it's always new people, and there's an opportunity to climb the social hierarchy, which I think gives a lot of people a purpose. Because who wants to live in a society where all you do is just sit down and eat cake, you know? And I've heard Jordan Peterson say this before. If you want to sit down and eat cake, well, guess what? Somebody's eventually going to just flip the table upside down and see what happens, because humans want chaos. We want a challenge. We want to attack something. It's like our human instinct that gives us our intrinsic value and purpose. So I've thought about that for a long time too.
That's exactly right. It's amazing how tribalistic that we as human beings can be. The terms of what tribe is who have changed. Whereas 2,000 years ago it was the Greeks versus the Romans versus the Phoenicians versus this and that. And nowadays it's the wealthy against the middle class. It's this and that. Some of it's leftist narrative that gets parroted, but it's the truth. I mean, take a look at the French Revolution. You saw a whole bunch of people rise up and literally rip apart their whole government. In fact, Robespierre was like, hey, let's guillotine a bunch of rich people, and then he went and got guillotined himself. So irony.
That's a tough scene.
It is, but we're inherently we want to try to defeat conflict, but then it breeds more conflict. Mm-hmm. And that's the way human history has been for thousands of years, and it's going to continue to be that way. I keep being told that, oh, hey, well, all we have to do is just do these things just right. We'll all be kumbaya just fine. I'm sorry, but I don't care selflessly for a person who lives in New Jersey. I don't care for that person as selflessly as I care for my wife. I'm wired that way. All of us are wired that way. You guys have different people that you love and care about than I do.
Yeah.
And that's
Brandon's reality. Definitely not one of those people, by the way.
Yeah. I care about absolutely nobody except myself.
Oh, you anarchist.
Yeah. actually, that is something that I've also been looking at lately. Is I think it's really dangerous when our human potential is tapped in the sense of tribalism. And so I've specifically seen this. I would say, well, for example, let's take the Black Lives Matter movement. Well, and then there was a protest here in Fargo called White Lives Matter. And it's just like, I can feel the tribalistic instincts coming within people. And I hate it because it is biological. There's a reason why it's in our blood. Think of when the Spanish came to America, shook hands with the Indians. 95% of the Indians died of disease. It's wired within our brains to stick to our culture, but we're trying to get beyond that. It's like, no, let's all like work together within the free market, and it doesn't have to be tribal. Like, we should recognize these human behavior patterns which created World War I, World War II, any war really. It's tribalistic. And so I just always think we need to cut it off right by the throat and like stop that behavior, because it's getting worse. It's getting worse in my opinion right now, especially because when we discussed this earlier, we're more polarized, and polarizing, I think, is our tribal instincts coming out.
And that's exactly right. Partisan, the divide between partisan people has never been wider, in my opinion. And it's gotten so wide that I feel like many people who think like we do, we're falling through the cracks. And so who do we turn to band together with? Well, it's gonna be ourselves. And racism too. Like, racism is in some cases systemic in certain governments at the local, county, even state level, depending on what state you're in. I don't see it here in North Dakota at all, but I do acknowledge that, hey, there might be some shady crap happening in other states. But let's talk about racism for a second. Racism is one of the worst collectivist ideologies that could have ever been perpetrated. We're judging people based on how much melatonin they have, or melatonin.
Yep, melanin.
Like one of those things, melanin. That's it. I'm thinking of the melatonin that helps you go to sleep.
That'll put you to sleep. Yep.
Yeah. So we're going to collectivize over a hatred of somebody whose skin is a different tone. What an insane thing to think about. Like how about that guy in Leith, or used to live in Leith, that Craig Cobb? What a bizarre whack job that guy is. If you ever listen to him speak, he's a very good speaker, but his ideas are utter garbage. Mm-hmm. They are utter garbage. And this is what brings us back to a free market, is the fact that we need to have a free market of ideas. And in today's world, we don't have that. If you say anything that goes against the 3x5 card of allowable opinion,
there you go.
If you go outside that narrative, and boy howdy, you are shut down. Or in the case of Michael Rechtenwald, he was a Marxist at NYU for his entire life. He was a tenured professor. Well, then all of a sudden he goes against the grain of Marxist thought and postmodern thought in the university, and he was thrown out onto his butt, which led him down this later in life rethinking of everything that he's ever believed. And now he's pretty much a libertarian. He goes from full-on Marxist, true believer, to libertarian in less than a year. Like that's a miracle. And it's a miracle of a free market of free ideas.
Wow. And another thing that I heard is, these people that are Marxists, the only reason that they can hold, like in a free society, they can hold those views. But like in a communist society, you can't, there is no other alternative. It is what they are giving you. So I find that funny as well. It's the society that's even allowing you to have these opinions. It's so ignorant to look at it like that. I also think about that, and I'm gonna be likely to guess that he probably took a deep trip to the underworlds and had an experience where he realized, just what we've been talking about, that you can't predict the way things are going to always go, but you can let the market decide. And that's the best you can possibly do in a world where the human experience is random. So
exactly. And, let's just use this frame. Let's legalize freedom. Yeah. Legalize freedom. Let people make choices. If they're going to be self-destructive, as long as they don't hurt anybody else, and let that person engage in that self-destructive choice. Now, that's just kind of a blanket statement. There are going to be exceptions. And I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but what the heck. Abortion. I am one of the most pro-life libertarians you will ever meet. I am through and through. Abortion is murder. There is no justification for it at all. The official party platform of the Libertarian Party is like there can be good faith arguments that are had on all sides. I recognize that, but I also recognize that as being wholly and irrevocably wrong.
Wow,
because we can't be self-destructive to our own selves. There was a study in Florida where 75% of abortions performed were elective, another 20% for socioeconomic reasons. So to me, 95% of abortions that happened with that information from that study happened for literally no good reason at all. The other 5% were medical or whatever. We're not going to talk about that. Let's talk about the 95% of baby murders that happened here. But sorry, I'm running this whole thing. I apologize.
No, you're the
No,
guest
okay.
here.
No, yeah.
This is perfect.
Run wild.
And actually, I agree with you. And this is a perfect lead in actually to another thing that I wanted to hit on is, well, if it's so polarized left and right, well, what's the alternative? And so I think there's a lot of people right now that are infiltrating the Libertarian Party. And I think there is a specific group of people that don't care for that too much because they like their ways that they've been set in since the party's been founded. And
the loser brigade. You were talking about the loser brigade.
Yes.
As Tom Wood so affectionately calls them. These are people who they embrace, like I'm sympathetic towards anarchy, but I'm sympathetic towards principled anarchy. Not that I'm a true believer of it, but I at least I get the argument. But there's this bent of anarchy that, like, that Nick Sarwark, who's part of the loser brigade, former and disgraced chairman of the ex chairman of the National Libertarian Party. There's this stint of anarchy that they just latch onto, that like that you have the right to do whatever you want, no matter how self-destructive it is, and you'll be darned if you're not going to let me do it. And
virtue signaling. They're virtue signaling. That's what I don't like.
Exactly. Yes.
It's like, no, yeah, talk's cheap. Why don't you live by your actions, and that'll really show who you're about. And so you can make all these claims, but don't talk about it, be about it, is what I always say. And it's funny because Brandon's actually a newer libertarian, and well, for those who saw my Twitter, I stuck it to the Nevada LP party because they had just a crazy post. I mean,
those guys are nuts.
This is crazy, folks. I mean, they'll call anybody who disagrees with them alt-right, Nazi, racist, anti-Semitic, like just everything that you could possibly think, because they can't have an intellectual discussion. And they know that right now there's a lot of people coming in, like somebody like Brandon, who just rejects virtue signaling and wants like a good alternative. And I think we have something going here. I mean, I've mentioned this before. Look at Ron Paul. Look at how many people supported Ron Paul. There is something that we are missing. Why do so many people like Jordan Peterson? There is a thirst for this, like for the genuine free market and let people do as they may, and not just as a virtue signaling, just fake, like, oh, like almost actually one thing they do is, okay, and so I do think sex work, now this is going to be controversial, I do think that like it should be legal, but I also don't think we should be promoting it on our platform like Nick Sarwark does. It's like, all right, yeah, you're looking like a clown out here, calling for prostitution, and it's like it has to be done the right way first of all, but it's just, to me it seems like they're just not hitting on the things that people want to actually hear. And so that's my biggest issue right now with the party.
They want to try to be radical in terms of like, hey, let's bring the left in on these things that we share with the left, but we can't come to the right and talk about things that they care about. I'm generally a pretty conservative person. I believe that my libertarianism actually enhances my conservatism and vice versa. And so like my whole thing, one of the biggest things, my soapbox is special assessments on houses. I could soapbox on that all day here, but long story short, I believe special assessments are an especially egregious form of taxation.
Yes.
That is one of the first things that needs to go away. Now, I can wait on regular property tax. I can wait on income tax. I'm morally opposed to those, but the first thing that we need to be rid of is special assessments, mostly because there was a very good friend of mine. I've known him and his family for years. We were very good friends in elementary and middle school and high school. And they had lived in a house in South Bismarck, had pre-existed any development in the area. Well, then a few years later, development happened. Long story short, they were nailed with $57,000 in a special assessment. They could pay the lump sum now, or they could pay $300 a month for 10 years. And the only reason why they were notified was because the city was obligated only by law to notify them via the official paper, the Bismarck Tribune. And you know where they found that out? My friend's mom was on her last round of chemo in the hospital. She just beat breast cancer. Her husband was sitting there reading the paper and found out about it that way.
Oh my gosh, that is tragic.
So then I confronted our old mayor. I'm blanking on his name right now. I confronted him about it at a coffee for mayor. And the long story short is that he told me, well, they chose to live there. I'm like, what an asinine thing to say. You know, how first of all, how dare you? You know, they wanted to live in that house. I think the biggest tragedy about it though was they had just dropped like $20,000 or $30,000 on a remodel of that. It was already a lovely house, but they made it even better. Well, guess what? Now that house is a pile of rubble in the landfill, and an apartment building went up there.
Wow. Yeah.
So
they shouldn't have
that's
Go ahead.
That's the biggest tragedy about local government, is exactly what I just outlined here, is the fact that the city can just come in and say, hey, you owe us $57,000 for quote unquote improvements that they never got any direct benefit from. The only quote unquote direct benefit they got was the fact that the road they lived off of got improved. That was it.
I just reject that. And also, let me clarify my position on sex work. First of all, I think it's your body, and if you want to transfer money with somebody, that's fine. But I don't agree with sex trafficking, by the way. That is a horrible thing. That is a horrible epidemic that's been going on. And that's not, I don't agree with that. That is, you're being forced to, and that is a tragedy. But I think like if it's voluntary, so be it. But again, I'm not going to go out there and, well, I am right now, but I guess I'm not going to like directly always be advertising, you know, that's not something that's not a platform that I would be proud.
That's nothing that's important. What's important is taxation. What's important is the mask mandates, the vaccines, the vaccine passports. What's important is the fact that our gun rights are under attack, that our Fourth Amendment rights are under attack, our First Amendment rights are under attack. We have a non-existent 10th Amendment because unfortunately our state legislators and our governor are cowards, and they will not take back what powers they delegated, that the state originally had, that they then gave to the federal government. They won't take those back. It's like, for example, collection of income taxes. Did you know that the state of North Dakota could actually collect federal income tax, and the state could decide what they're going to give Washington, D.C.? That is a thing that we can do, but they won't do it. You know why? Because they're afraid of the federal government.
It's like, no, you got to stick up and stand for something. And that's also why I'm hoping that the Libertarian Party can move in the right direction, because it's a outlet for us to stand up to it and go, that's not right. And also the tax assessments, that's not right. That should never ever happen in a million years, no matter what. And so it's a good opportunity, in my view, to finally stand up to them. So
yeah, for me, you know, kind of shifting towards libertarianism over the last few years, it's not so much about kind of giving in and like just shutting it all out. It's kind of standing up and rejecting the negatives of both sides, really. I mean, there's going to be negatives on both sides, and you're trying to find a more, I don't want to say gray area, but everything shouldn't be so black and white. Like a decision shouldn't be either all in or all out.
Either R or D. It
Yeah,
shouldn't be
Exactly.
like that.
exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. And so it's sort of not necessarily pick and choose, but it feels a lot more like you're standing up to, really bad decisions and able to kind of work in the right direction.
Yeah, and the thing about here it is. People show up to the polling booth, and if you tell them you voted for anything other than R&D, what is the first thing they say? You wasted your vote. Yeah, and it's like, all right, so now if that person gets pressured into voting R&D, imagine that times thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And that's exactly the climate that we're in. And then what's the alternative? Gary Johnson, George Jorgensen's not horrible, but Joe Jorgensen, I mean, it's just like, come on, man. It's time to capitalize. People are tired of Joe Biden and Donald Trump. I genuinely think there is a large portion of independents that are sick of it, but they just don't know the alternative because, oh, you're wasting your vote. And so I think that's the climate we're in, which is why to steer back into the party, the Mises Caucus is trying to give people a genuine, legitimate alternative. So that's what sold me.
And that's the one thing that I'm so thankful for with the LPMC, is the fact that finally somebody has gotten together. They're starting to kick some teeth in, make some changes in the party, and finally get organized, get libertarianism back to the table. Because like I said, there's this stint of anarchy that's running rampant through this leftist anarchy is running rampant through the party. You got the I think his name is Dave Shipley or something like that. I can't remember his name, but he's a hardcore leftist libertarian. And I don't know if you ever seen him speak. He is just, I shouldn't cast judgment. I apologize. It's unchristian. But he just spews utter nonsense. Like I remember when he ran for chairman of the LNC. Basically, the big juggernauts of the whole debate was Mike Shipley. That's his name, not Dave Shipley. Mike Shipley. That's his name. It was Mike Shipley versus Joshua Smith versus Joe Bishop Henchman. Those were your three big ones that were running for chairman of the LNC. Let me tell you, the only two people that I could actually listen to was Joshua Smith and Joe Bishop Henchman. Mike Shipley was this complete, utterly nonsensical. He made no arguments that made any sense. He wanted to, this bottom up unity, whatever. Okay, fine, get the bottom to rise up. That whatever, do it. But you're not gonna find that rhetoric is gonna be very friendly to you here in the current conditions of the party. Because guess what? We're not Marxists. We're not communists.
Yeah.
We don't believe in this leftist. We don't believe in this leftist ideology that he has clung to bitterly.
It's not necessarily, I think, that you're even judging him. It's more so we need to reject these bad ideologies. And it's really interesting, actually, that you bring up faith. And I've mentioned this before, but I think a society that doesn't have any now, and I think the religion and state can obviously get extremely controversial, but I also think that more so the culture. If you're primarily atheist, you lean towards, well, something's got to take place of religion. It just has to. So what takes place? Ideologies. And communism. So for example, in Russia, if you go look up, was communist Russia atheist? You'll see that what they did is they reprimanded all faith, and they just wanted you to focus on the ideology of communism. You look at Nazi Germany. Hitler claimed to be the Messiah, so he was like a god, so they made him the religion, and so this sets the stage for tribalism. And so to me, I think actually a society that has a culture based upon faith is more likely to be freer. That's what I've studied over a historical perspective. Anytime society goes away from faith, there's usually an ideology takes place. And I've mentioned this before, but Friedrich Nietzsche, in his book in 1860 actually made the claim, which he wasn't, and I've said this before, he wasn't necessarily praising this. It wasn't a good thing to him. His claim was God is dead. Society was no longer, the culture was not religious. And he predicted that communism was going to take place and millions of people were going to die in the 20th century. What happened in the 20th century? 50 million people in Russia died. And then, of course, you can think about the Holocaust. And then, of course, you can think about all the people that died at D-Day. And then, of course, you can think about even Japan. It's the same thing. So that's really something that grabbed me, really gave me a stronger sense of my faith, I think.
Well, when you take away,
so go ahead, Brandon. Sorry, go ahead. I was just
Okay.
gonna make a quick point here, but go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say quick. When you take away religion and you give someone else in the position of power that godlike figure, it's unchallenged power. Like when you make someone in the figure that is a godlike figure and they are the Messiah, there's no one to challenge them if people really buy into it. And you see that with communist, Soviet Union. There was absolutely nobody standing up to it because they all believed in it. And if you're an official or you're high up, you are absolutely unchallenged in power. There's no free market and there's absolutely no exchange for any other thought besides one person. And if they're not absolutely the perfect human being and they're going to make every single right decision, then it's going to go to shit eventually.
That's the biggest problem with any sort of centralized planning apparatus, is the fact that it literally relies on the right person who believes the right things to be at a right position at the right time to do the right thing.
All the time as well.
All the time, yes. and like that is not a thing that's not a thing that has ever happened. I don't have that much faith in humanity. Sorry.
No. And it's interesting because when you think of the way the Bible specifically was written, it was a really, really unconventional idea. It's like there's a God, and even if you're the ruler of a country, you still got to answer to him. It's like you aren't above everybody else. Like everybody's got to answer to. And I think that's something that I personally agree with and align with, because at the end of the day, we're all like flawed as people, and I don't think anybody held up to a Messiah is ever going to end good, and we have historical
exactly right.
data to back that. Yeah.
I'm going to take back what I just said. Actually, there's only been one person who's been at the right place at the right time to do the right thing for the right reasons. That was Christ himself.
There you go. Yeah. See,
so
and that is actually, that's on the Bible. It's like we want to act like Christ and act like a good and virtuous person. And so I think when people look down on religion, I think it's silly. And I think you can't just overlook the significance of Christianity, even if you aren't a Christian. You can't overlook this significance of the culture that it created for people to be able to be virtuous and be good people. So
that's exactly right. So I kind of want to use this kind of as a catapult to let's talk about the libertarian purity police. I absolutely refuse to be considered a purist libertarian. I have Republican sympathies, I have Democrat sympathies, I have libertarian sympathies. The reason why I'm a libertarian is because I feel like this party is the best way to enact the most amount of freedom that we could possibly do. Freedom is what counts, right? And I hate it when the Puritan police go in and say, well, you can't say that because that's not libertarian. And well, guess what? Like I said, I refuse to be a pure libertarian. In fact, I consider, if anybody calls me a pure libertarian, I'm going to take that as an insult, because I'm not going to fall in the 3x5 card of allowable opinion of what libertarianism is. I refuse to do that. So, Brandon, with you being a newcomer to the fold, welcome, by the way. If you have any reservations, if there's anything that you believe that might run contrary to libertarian thought, my first suggestion is, do research, look up whoever it is that you need to look up to maybe refine your thoughts, but don't be afraid to have an opinion that might be contrary in some way to libertarianism. because default libertarianism Inc. is, like, for example, we covered abortion. I hold the NAP very, very dear, especially when it comes to protecting the unborn. Human life begins at conception. It's that simple. That runs contrary to libertarianism Inc. So if you feel that way, you're not alone. So,
Yeah, and also don't get discouraged by like you said, the Puritan police, because you will find, I guarantee you will run into that world of, oh, well, you're not a real libertarian, blah, 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 blah. It's like, actually, another thing that I respected about Ron Paul was he was also pro-life. So,
yes.
and that's a great example of a candidate that ran that doesn't necessarily apply to all of the points that libertarianism in its core might stand for. You don't have to necessarily, like Brett said, agree with everything. So I do, and that's also for any listeners here too. It's really, we're all saying here, think independently for yourself. Think for yourself.
Yes.
I mean,
So
it's ridiculous.
Oh, go ahead, Brandon. Sorry.
I was gonna say it's ridiculous to think that you have to think a certain way to be a libertarian, because not even, the ideals and what the Democratic Party has stood for has changed so much over time, as well as the Republican Party. Like, there's the core values that kind of stick, but their message and the way that they do things has changed so drastically over time. And a lot of it too is they don't use it necessarily because it's what they believe in. They're doing it to push a certain narrative or an agenda. So it feels very forced and fake. And to say that you have to go along with this old way of thinking and everything has to be a certain way, you're really just harming yourself in the end run. So I like you said, I like to think independently. And if I think a lot of people have the stigma about libertarianism, like my dad, for one, when I didn't like come out as a libertarian to him, but I kind of told him like my way of thinking about stuff, and he's like, oh, so kind of libertarian. I'm like, yeah, but not every single thing. It doesn't have to just be black and white, like I said, like independent thought. And I don't know about, getting him to think about stuff more openly, and that you don't have to blindly follow something, like what's the saying? You want to stand for, I'll never like bow to a man, or like stand for ideals, not a man, or like something like that. I can't even think of what it is. I'm totally blanking.
Or I've heard one also, like, stand for something or fall for anything. So you also got to have principles that you live upon as well.
Exactly.
And also principle over party every time.
Mhm.
That to me is a winning message. The only problem is that we are going back to, like I said, this tribalistic thing where, we're all members of the Libertarian Party. Republicans are part of the Republican Party, Democrats, Democrat Party. We run off of this very tribalistic system where, you can run with an R next to your name, and all you're going to do is attract people that vote R. You're gonna turn away people that vote L and vote D. And so, but the ironic thing is that the message of people over party, or principle over party, both things, that is a message that is wildly popular, but we can't enact it because of our political system the way it is.
Yes, and that's another
unless you run for a political office that isn't partisan.
Yes, like city commissioner, I believe, is one that's nonpartisan.
City commission, county commission, all the way up, like the highest one that's nonpartisan is superintendent of public instruction.
Yeah. By the way, I looked at running for city commissioner, and I was just kind of dabbling into looking at it. And what other position that have you ever heard of that gives themselves a 40% pay raise? I looked in Fargo, and Fargo they did this, or they passed a thing that gave them a 40% pay raise, and I just thought to myself,
that would not fly over well at the place I work at. Of course, I'll give myself a 40% raise. I did a pretty good job. Yeah,
exactly.
If I do say so myself.
Gotta love government, right?
Yes. Well, this is a great conversation today, and I think the last time that we talked real like political is probably when we had Marty on. So it's a pleasure to have you on. And also, by the way, I mentioned this before, but make sure you check out Brett's podcast, Talking Into the Void. I've also listened to your episodes, and you've made great strides, and I think that I love the show. So
well, thank you very much. It's literally my ADD rattled brain just blurping stuff out into the world, but hey, there it is.
Talking into the void
Yeah.
and seeing if
Yep.
something talks back, right?
That's right. Well, tell you what, I don't know how much more time we've got, but I would love to talk about, you guys' origin stories. How have we come to libertarianism? But if we're running out of time, then we can discuss it.
No,
another time.
there is no time limit, baby.
Oh, cool. So I don't know if you guys want to start. If you want me to start, I sure can.
I'd love to hear your story, actually.
Yeah.
Sure. So this is going way back. Just to give you an idea, I'm probably a good 10 years older than you guys. I'm 29. So my whole political journey kind of started, I'd say, middle school to high school, where I was a Republican. In fact, I was a neoconservative of the worst way. I thought George Bush could do no wrong, that Iraq War II was completely justified, because guess what? There were nukes in Iraq.
Yeah.
My
right.
God, we're gonna bomb that country into a parking lot. Boy, howdy, did my opinion change. But I was a true blue, like neocon. I was totally in for John McCain right away when he voted or ran for president against Barack Obama. Luckily, my opinion of him changed pretty rapidly, actually. It was really the crux of it was Ron Paul. And I can't tell you how many people that I've met that said, okay, what brings you to libertarianism? Oh, it was Ron Paul. I'm one of the Ron Paul disciples. He's the one that brought me here. You guys too, apparently. And which is amazing, because like even to this day, Ron Paul is not active in politics at all. He's an old man. He's enjoying his retirement years, as he should. He's done amazing work. But he's still bringing young people to the fold, which I commend you to for jumping in. But I remember the OG days where he ran for president in 2008, 2012, and he really brought a lot to the fold in terms of making sure that we're principled, making sure that we get libertarian ideas, just spreading the idea of liberty, for crying out loud. But anyway, sorry, I'm getting off track here. My whole view started to change in a big way when I graduated in the spring of 2009. My dad gave me was a copy here. I'll grab the book. It is the Conservative's Handbook, written by Phil Valentine, and here, that's what it looks like. I can't see it all that well, I guess, but I read this book at my family cabin that summer, and I took it a lot to heart. And also, a lot of advice that my dad gave me was always be suspicious of the government, no matter who's in charge, no matter if it's somebody that you even support as a Republican or whatever. Always be suspicious. And that, I really took that to heart, and I took a lot of what was in this book to heart as well. And it's been 10 years since I read it, but anyways, I always held that deep idea of suspicion for government, for the government. Like, they never do the right thing at all at the right time. And what really woke me up was when Obamacare passed. That was way back in 2011, 2010. When I saw that Republicans were signing on to the bill, as long as they got their part of the pork spending that was in that bill too. Another part of it too was guaranteeing student loans. Well, what does that have to do with healthcare? It has nothing to do with healthcare. So then, all of a sudden, the way my student loans were being carried out, I had all my student loans through the Bank of North Dakota. Well, then all of a sudden, I was forced onto this federal system. To then I had to accept student loans from a different bank that I had no idea who they were or where they came from. But hey, the federal government told me so if I wanted to get a student loan. So that's another part of it that just really ran it home for me, that, you know what, maybe these Republicans aren't as principled, aren't as stalwart as I thought they were. And so that's kind of what led me to the idea that, you know what, I'm gonna start breaking from the Republican Party. If that's how they're going to do, if they're gonna cave over even small things, they're gonna cave over big things, and vice versa. If they're gonna cave on big things, they're gonna cave on small things. And so that's when I decided, you know what, I had enough. I don't know what I am, but I know I'm not a Republican. Well, then I started really listening to Ron Paul and his speeches, And that's when it clicked. And for me in 2011 was like, you know what? I am a libertarian. I really do believe this. I still, I still hold some conservative Republican beliefs, but my mind has really been changed, especially when it came to war. And then eventually I got introduced to Tom Woods, starting listening to him, and it's just everything ideologically kind of fell into place. And it took some time. It took me a good probably 5 years to really refine my beliefs, but I think I've arrived at the optimum point that I can be at. And so I want to hear where, what your origin stories were.
Yeah. Well, I guess I've always been interested in people and the way everything works just in general. Ever since I was a kid, I've always just listened to, everybody would tell me, like, I would sit at restaurants, and when the adults would talk, I would never color. I just listened to the adults talk, and I wouldn't say a word the entire time. And so I've always listened to people, and so I've always had this interest in ideas. And so, well, and I think I really started to get involved in politics my freshman year of high school, actually. Uh, you know, specifically, I would actually, I'll give credit to Dell, actually. And I think I've mentioned this before, but he is my uncle. And so he would just say stuff. He never like necessarily convinced me or was like giving me this like lecture. He never, ever did that. But his ideas were so good that in the free marketplace, I was sold on them. So you don't need to necessarily convince when it's just like, well, I like that idea. So that's, to me, is convincing enough. And so I would say another specific thing that I remember is my junior year in an AP US history class. We had a debate in the class about Abraham Lincoln's suspension of habeas corpus. And our teacher, Mr. Cozy, goes, all right. And by the way, Brennan was in this class, so he's one of the victims. So Mr. Rakosi went, all right, raise your hand if you thought that it was warranted. And every single person in the class, other than me, raised their hand. And then he goes, and then obviously I was the only guy that didn't raise my hand. So he looks at me and he goes, all right, why? So then I sold my case and I go, no matter what the circumstances are, if you buckle on principles and set the precedent, it is bound to happen again. And I think we look now, and habeas corpus has been suspended actually beyond after the Civil War as well. And so
just by fiat, yes. Not even official decree, just by fiat. But anyway, continue. Sorry.
No, it's all good. And then so I would say I started to, that was what struck me actually, because I texted Marty, by the way, that right after that, because I was just I couldn't believe that not a single other person stood up or just thought that was wrong. And he just told me, like, that is the reality of the situation. But he also told me that if you stand up for something, you'd actually be surprised, because some of the people that raised their hand before might actually be questioning their position because you were able to stand up and have the courage. And so I thought, well, that's interesting, because it seems like the Republican and Democrat is like the same thing as everybody raising their hand. And I go, well, maybe there is, in, like, I was exactly in your position. I wasn't sure what I was. And I was like, well, I don't agree with the Republicans all the time. And I was I am more sympathetic to the right. But there were some things to the right where I just thought they were kind of being boomers about it. or the spending is just like outrageous. And so I guess I really started to mature when I started listening to Tom Woods. He really introduced me. I had never listened to a podcast before. And so my freshman year of college, he was the first podcast episode I'd ever listened to. And it was about Trump. And it was actually talking about, because everything you heard in the news was just bashing Trump, and it was just all horrible. And he wasn't necessarily praising Trump, but he was giving like a different perspective. Like, not every single thing he did was evil. And I thought that was interesting, because it's really interesting that Trump can win. And that's what made me realize that there is actually, people are tired of the establishment, and Trump was the next best thing that they could think of. And so they voted for Trump. And so I thought, So then I started, Tom Woods sold me on libertarianism. And from there, it's just, it's sprouted from there. And of course, I've watched a ton of Ron Paul, and I also find one of his videos from 1988.
Ooh, I know the one you're talking about.
Yep. And he is standing up there, and there is a crowd of people, just a massive crowd. He's just sitting there calmly, and they are just chanting at him, just say no. And what is that for? The war on drugs. And we all know how catastrophic the war on drugs has been and how much of a failure it's been. But because Ron Paul was principled and he stood up for it, he was ahead of his time. And now look at some states, Oregon decriminalized all drugs. And it's just like, wow. To me, it's like if you can be principled and stand for something, it doesn't matter what society is saying to you, you know what's right and wrong. And so that's what sold me on libertarianism. So that's my story.
I guess for me, you know, I started kind of riding the coattails when Adam started kind of getting on the wave. I would say he would always say the phrase, and Adam, you know the phrase, taxation is theft. Always just he would always just snap text me that randomly, just say it, like he just say it just to something, like he, like half the time he just say it just to see what I would say. And then he would get serious every now and then about it, and then I'd really think about it, and then we'd have a deep discussion about it. And after that, you know, I kind of was thinking about, like, you know, with the recent light of the events of 2016's election and all the media, and before then I was definitely into in about 2015 2014 I listened to a lot of Ben Shapiro, and Milo Yiannopoulos was a guy that was around. He was the gay guy that was like, he was just anti-social justice warrior, right? Like he just roasted people. He didn't really have a good argument for stuff. He just liked to make chaos. And it wasn't so much that I like saw them as like a role model for like their beliefs. It was more so like just sticking it to the power, like stop telling us that we're like people are evil for thinking something's a little bit absurd. And you know, so I kind of started getting this thing where I'm like, I really don't like being told from either side what to do. And you know, you have to believe in a certain thing if you're conservative, or you know, if you're not, if you're a liberal, or you know, you're on the left, you have to believe this, and everyone on the other side has to be evil. And going into college, I met a diverse group of people from all over the United States. I interact with them, you know, we bleed together, we spend every single day together. And a lot of the guys had vastly different political opinions than me. And just getting to know them as a person, there was not a single one of us that was so different from one another that we wouldn't, I mean, not give our lives, I would say, but we were willing to jump on the grenade at that point. Like you form a bond with people that have different opinions. And it really opened my eye, like all this stress being placed on the people from both sides of the government, you know, R&D, they're purposely using this stress to divide everyone apart from each other. And it feels so, and it feels so gross to me to even want to support either side. And I started to think independently about everything, because I absolutely hated the idea of me, like teammates and friends not wanting to hang out with each other anymore, or not want to be the same because some person in a suit told you not to think that way. So you have to do it, right? That is the most absurd thing ever. To be like, to be with someone for 3 years and you're absolutely like just working together and everything. But as soon as something happens and a guy in a suit tells you what to do, you have to disassociate yourself because you align R&D and it's different. So after that, I really was just like, I'm done being really either. I still would say I lean conservative with a lot of my ideals on like abortion and gun control and a lot of stuff like that. But the idea of being able to be free of thought and not being told that the government is always right all the time, and just like kind of taking a deeper look of myself and what I kind of stand for, I think is what brought me in. Because to me, what I stand for is what I want to be standing for something else as well, if that makes sense.
No, that's a good way of putting it. Kind of on a related note to what you just said, you know, you're still leaning conservative with, you know, especially when it comes to being pro-life and gun, you know, being against gun control. There's an individual in the LPND name is Roland Reimers. I don't know if you guys know him at all. He's up in Grand Forks. He's run for different things. He's made the news in a few occasions
I'm just
and
gonna,
in a bad light.
yeah, yeah.
So, but anyways, I remember it was at a meeting that the North Dakota Libertarian Party had back in September of 2019, and I was trying my best, and I ultimately have failed, but I tried my best to make the party at least issue a statement that, hey, you know what, we like to, we stand for life. And unfortunately, the way party politics is structured, you have to follow lock and step with what the national platform is. If you remove that abortion plank from the national platform, maybe I would have had something. But anywho, I made a speech, and then he came up after me and started. Basically, he was roundabout attacking me, but not actually calling my name. But he was looking right at me, and I'm just like, hey, bring it on, buddy. And he'll go and he'll call anybody who's pro-life. He'll call them, this pro-birth cult and all of this, and it's just I don't get it. Roland, he's a generous person when it comes to making sure that people have their freedoms and their day in court if they do something wrong. He's actually gotten some nonviolent offenders. I think when it comes to like a minor in possession of drugs or alcohol or whatever, he's actually spent money on lawyers to help those people out. But at the same time, the man is just, he's old. I think he's 75, something like that. He should sunset himself into the wild blue yonder and let the new blood take over.
I'm excited.
And,
it's kind of
sorry,
like
my wife just brought me dinner, and my dog just rolled in here. So thanks, babe.
yeah, speaking of a dog. Yeah,
But,
that's how I feel. I feel like a dog right now that's on a leash, and I'm just like barking right now. I'm just excited, man. I just want to jump in and get involved right now, and it's probably being young, and that's just the stage.
Right now is a perfect time. Perfect is not actually not the technical term I would use, but it's a better time than none at all, because North Dakota, we're just coming off of our legislative session that's ending here in the next week or two, I think. Right now is the time to get organized. We need to attack the midterms head on. If you live in an odd numbered district in North Dakota, your local legislator and your local legislators, your one senator and two representatives, are up for election in odd numbered districts. And if we want to, throw a shot across their bow, the best thing we can do is run somebody against them, get into the debates, and let the people know, hey, there's a better alternative than R and D out there. You've got the L's, and we're not very big, but we're at least an alternative. There's somewhere that people who don't necessarily fit in, or they want to fit in but they're not liking what the two parties are doing, they're more than welcome to join our ranks. And be active, get involved, run for something, support people who are running for something, make it happen.
Yes.
I mean, I was, especially when I first got active in party, Libertarian Party stuff. Actually, it was back in 2014. I was probably the biggest supporter of Jack Siemens in the Bismarck area. I went to the street fair in September of that year, and I had two Jack Siemens signs roped around my body just so I could advertise and walk around. I did that for 3 hours, and then I went to a bar and had a few beers. And I gave out some literature and stuff like that. People giving me looks, but I was like, I don't care.
That's awesome. That's funny.
That's how you can get involved. It's just do crazy stuff like that. I mean, yes. I talked about politics at work, which you should never do, by the way. But so yeah, that's one of the crazy things is that I've done is just getting involved, just doing something, even if it means just networking with people in your area. like that's the reason why I was kind of a little bit late tonight for this podcast. Was actually I had a meeting with a couple of people. Caitlin, I think you spoke to her, Adam,
Yep.
and then and actually an old neighbor of mine. He runs the Libertarians of North Dakota page. We all three of us got together. We were going to try and start an affiliate for Burley County, but that didn't go anywhere, unfortunately. But we're gonna try again, and we're gonna get something going here, because one of the biggest things that, and this is just politics in general, is the best thing you can do is to start taking back control of your government. Is you have to start local. So, start in your county, start in your city, start in your neighborhood. If you are unfortunate enough to live in an HOA, get on that HOA board.
Yeah.
If you live in a city, get on the city commission. Get on, or like another example here is actually we've got what's the position? It's the garrison diversion something or other. That's an elected position. I don't know what it does. It's something to do with the Garrison Dam, but down here in Burley County, I don't know how that works, but that's an elected position apparently, is being in charge of that. So who knows, somebody might run for that and try to beat the guy who's done it for 20 years.
There you go.
Get on your county commission. If you're a person who's if you're a libertarian leaning cop, run for sheriff of your county and become a constitutional sheriff. We have a severe shortage of constitutional sheriffs. Stick it to the federal government and the state government by saying, "Oh, this is law. No, I'm not going to enforce it. Sorry." And here's the thing: there's nothing they can do. Well, in North Dakota, which is this is the most insane thing, the governor can dismiss a sitting sheriff.
Wow.
That is a severe, massive overreach, in my opinion, especially when it comes to law enforcement. Because if the people of a county want their sheriff to be in there, and all of a sudden the governor doesn't like what that sheriff is doing, then the governor can just go like, "Oh, you're done. Get out of here." Which
I
is,
did not know that. That is interesting.
there's not much like that in any other states, so far as I know. So North Dakota is very much in the minority.
We're a conservative state too.
Yeah. Hey, yeah, we're pro law enforcement, here in this state.
That's true.
But here's the thing, another thing too is that North Dakota is a unicorn in this union, because guess what? We have a state mill, we have a state bank. Now the state bank, believe it or not, is not tied to the Federal Reserve System. So take that for what you will. Yeah, it's state owned, but it's not tied to the Federal Reserve. So, give and take there. But man, let me tell you, if we're not tied to the Federal Reserve, that's not the worst thing in the world.
It's very true.
So, especially when the state bank has some excellent services for the people of North Dakota. I'm a huge stickler on state sovereignty. So if the people of North Dakota, hey, if we want to have our own bank and our own state mill, the early progressives way back at the turn of the last century, they voted for that. That's why we have the state mill. That's why we have the state bank. If they're using government as a force for good for the people of North Dakota by offering certain programs like student loans or loan consolidation, that is amazing, because they can offer interest rates that are competitive, if not significantly lower than what you can find elsewhere. So take that with what you will. As for the state mill, I don't know, privatize it.
Yeah, there you go. See, always looping it back in. That's awesome. Well, I think that's a good spot to wrap up too. And so we got all our stories, and I think we got a lot of, we had a good discussion today, and hopefully people can take something away from it that they probably hadn't have heard before. And hopefully it was off of the 3x5 card of allowable opinion, as Tom Wood says. And thank you for tuning in for another episode, and we will be back again next week, and we'll probably bring Brett on again in the future here.
I would love to be. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And thank you everybody for tuning in, and be great and be built different.